I'm Thomas Davies. I'm a tech lead for Visionular. I work in RTC and video coding specifically. I've been in the industry for many years, working on RTC applications for Cisco and leading R&D at the BBC on video coding.
Thomas, it's great to have you on the VideoVerse. I know you really are an expert in RTC, and we're going to talk today about the hybrid world of video conferencing. Just really what's happened in the space. A lot has changed over the last certainly like 15 years. Now with the proliferation of basically RTC type video conferencing apps on literally any device. The other day I was setting up something in a car we just got, and although of course they don't put video on the dashboard console, navigation system, but there was full integration with Zoom, full integration with Teams. It was really remarkable. I thought, wow, it's coming to the car, literally. So I think it'd be awesome to just start our interview and start the conversation around, give us a good overview of how the video conferencing world, the products, the technologies, the codecs, what has changed? And, if you want to keep it pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, I'll let you kind of determine the divider there. But
So I think what happened with the pandemic was really acceleration rather than a step change in the kind of things. So there's a few different ways in which things have developed. So we've talked about video conferencing, and people have in mind calling like this, or having an online meeting, and that of course was a lot of what people experienced during the pandemic, often for the first time. But what has happened really is the creation of whole new domains of video-related collaboration. So things like hybrid events, online conferences, where you are trying to create curated streams that people can participate in, and that involves the integration of video conferencing with traditional streaming architectures, CDNs essentially, where you have to deliver video to many thousands of people, but you also have to allow them to participate at the same time. And then there are kind of video augmented collaboration applications. So you might want to do some kind of collaborative coding, for example, developing an application or collaboratively editing a document. So there has been a proliferation of companies and applications where you edit documents online, you share your screen in creative ways, and so on. So I think there's been a specialization and a fragmentation of the solution space. I think that's one thing that has happened. There's been this convergence between streaming and video conferencing to cope with very large scale. And there's been the development of the infrastructure to support the rollout of these services to very large numbers of people, and support either very large numbers of conferences and calls, or simply very large numbers of participants in a call. So I think it's been all those things together, and there's been, within those spaces, there's been a growth in the number and kind of support tools that you have. So we're not just talking about video, but video plus lots of helpful tools to help you with your working life in particular.
That's right. It strikes me as now transcription is almost a required feature in a lot of these solutions and tools, so that you can produce a transcript for meeting notes or whatever. And I mean, that's just
Yeah.
scratching the surface. There's so many other apps, I guess you could call them, as really what they are, that are getting integrated into these platforms that really do make our work life better. They are productivity tools. Maybe we don't all use them, but it's interesting.
Yeah, there's certainly a large toolkit, increasingly driven by AI techniques. Um,
That's right. Yeah.
so real-time translation has been a hugely successful recent innovation. Some teams, especially in international companies, are relying on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the time to allow their teams to work together,
Mm-hmm.
and then coupled with transcription, which is increasingly not just about writing down the text of what people said, but identifying subheadings, action points, agenda items,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can go back and find who it was who agreed to do X.
Yeah.
It's not just hidden in the text; it's identified. So these are the kind of features that you want that actually enable you to 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 really have a more successful meeting.
Yeah.
It's obviously not a substitute for running your meeting well and in a clear and intelligent manner, but certainly it's very useful that you don't need to minute these meetings in the way that you might have wanted to minute an important meeting in the past.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm super curious. You've been working in the space for a long time, RTC, and can you tell us how the expectations have changed technically, like even in terms of meeting size that a platform needs to support? So I don't know, 10 years ago or 15, 12 years ago, whatever, was a big meeting like 10 participants, 12, 20, 40, or like what size, did when you were designing and you were engineering products and you're optimizing these solutions? What
Yes,
were
I
your
think it was.
targets then? And then what are the targets now? Because I think they're quite different.
So I think in the early days, things were more driven by transcoding. So in order to provide um, meetings at good meeting quality, there were MCUs that did transcoded video conferences, and
That's
they
right.
had a certain capacity of 50 ports, or maybe they got bigger, 100 or 200 ports. Now they could
Mm,
support larger meetings by cascading to additional servers or additional infrastructure.
sure.
But you're
Sure.
talking about meetings being dozens of people rather than hundreds or thousands. So to
Yeah.
reach that number of people, you either need a switched architecture or you need some kind of streaming architecture or some mixture of both. So you can have various architectures. You can have your MCU can have a streaming component, or your switch server can have a
Mhm.
streaming component. It's really about how you want to manage distribution of those streams and
Mhm.
what kind of level of interactivity you want. But it's always been a
Yeah.
goal for lots of customers that they want to be able to have their all hands over video. And
Sure.
typically in the past, that required a different product. So Cisco WebEx would do that, but you needed to use a sort of more TV-like part of the product rather
Mhm.
than just using a conventional meeting to have a very
Mhm.
large meeting with a large number of participants. So
Now,
increasingly things are getting hybrid in those kind of
yeah.
solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Remind me again, MCU. What does that stand for?
It stands for multi-point control unit. So it was the
That's right.
term given to um, usually given to a transcoding solution. Um, on the switching side, you often see something like SFU, selective forwarding unit. These are the sort of acronyms that tend to be bandied about in the space.
Got it. Okay. Well, it's interesting because I think about MCU is, I don't know if Cisco originated that, but at least that's where I've seen the term used, and I'm sure other vendors are, using the same terminology. And then along comes Zoom, and it's all OTT internet based. Is there still a place for this? I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think of it as sort of the enterprise on-premise, heavy-duty, type conferencing solutions, or is everything really already gone to the internet? And you have Microsoft with Teams, and obviously Zoom, and of course WebEx is also, I believe, fully on the internet, but what does that look like architecturally?
So that's not quite so, actually. So you with WebEx, I believe you could deploy it, locally, and there were certainly many internal debates about what the best architecture to support enterprise customers was. There is always going to be a critical issue about the amount of bandwidth that you will consume if you use cloud infrastructure or entirely for your internal video communications, if you're using video very heavily. So so you can deploy conferencing products from most vendors in an internal way if you want. And save yourself those bandwidth costs. And what tends to be the pain point for companies is having to manage that infrastructure themselves. And I think that was the issue in the old world, was having to deploy physical boxes to people's premises. Now that required specific management. Now that moved pretty quickly to deploying generic virtual machines to people's to people's premises for them to do their conferencing. But I think there will always be a need for companies to own their own video and own their video infrastructure. But the majority of small companies, in particular, and medium-sized enterprises, I think will depend on the cloud world and on generally provided video infrastructure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, we did another episode, and I'm not sure which one's going to come out first. So maybe you've heard it, or maybe it's coming next. But where we focused on the video coding aspects of RTC. So I'm curious, one of the things I don't believe we talked about in that interview was, are there any differences between what you can do in the area of video coding, and, whether there's maybe more tools that you can utilize, or if you have a little more even CPU horsepower available? Are you able to approach things differently in sort of the MCU world versus the cloud? Or is it really just a matter of where the technology is being deployed, where the software is being deployed?
It's pretty similar, really. So when you talk about cloud deployments, you're really talking about the server that people talk to.
Exactly.
So whether it's SFU versus MCU or cloud versus on-premise, it's possible that if you had a traditional on-premise transcoding product, you could change quality levels and capacity if you want. You could do fewer ports at higher quality. I think almost no one did that ever. They really wanted the maximum capacity because this stuff was really expensive, right? So you just wanted to get the most through that you could. the main thing would be in the transcoding case that you really have an issue with scale, which meant that some very clever and very specialized transcoding products got built that really do a very, very good job of trading off complexity versus speed to get reasonable scale.
Yeah.
But I think what's happening now more is that you get these hybrid switched transcoded architectures. So the reason that you still want transcoding is because it breaks that end-to-end communication between one client and all the other clients. So in a switched architecture, if one receiver is having lots of difficulty receiving, it's going to keep on requesting the stream is restarted with iframes. Now, if you can decouple that bad receiver by transcoding for them, then it's only getting iframes from the server. It's not getting them from the originator of the stream. So those iframes are not going to every single participant in the conference. And that can be a big deal if the conference is really large. So for people on mobile, for example, they might end up always transcoded in that kind of hybrid architecture because the error resilience is poor and they're just spoiling it for everyone else.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. How many of these video conferencing platforms are, let me see if I can phrase the question in the most clear way. Is it video conferencing first with like virtual meeting as an add-on? Or are they two kind of separate applications that, some vendors sort of, in some cases market, like, I'm thinking there's some, there's some well-known virtual meeting platforms that are just virtual meeting platforms. Even though I suppose you could strip them down to their most basic element and be like, well, we could use it as just a video conference, but I'm thinking of Zoom as one vendor, not to name, but where they really seem to be focused on adding on this whole kind of, hey, we can do virtual events now on the platform. I'm curious from your perspective, like, what are you seeing as general trends? And is there an advantage to kind of an all-in-one solution that can do it all? Do you really need specialization? How do you think about that as an engineer and as a,
Yeah, so I think these things are very driven by features. I think it's noticeable that there's been a lot of feature competition between Zoom and WebEx and Teams about getting the highest level of integration. So Teams has the advantage that it can integrate with Office, so that
that's right. That's compelling.
You can have your Outlook and so on. Having messaging integrated, it seems to be really useful. And when you think about the sort of trends in the kind of requirements that users have, when you think about advances in conferencing, you think, well, 3D and immersive reality and so on. You think about the video part, but actually, if you want to be productive, often it's all having these other tools together that allows you to work collaboratively that is maybe more important. So having shared document repositories, as you can have in Teams, having a really good chat application, and I always found that the WebEx Teams, as it was, the WebEx chat was very useful. So having this integration can give you a toolkit of things. But talking about the engineering challenge is just the complexity of shipping hundreds of features in a single product, which makes it hard to ship everything at once. And so to meet deadlines for shipping things is tough. Your feature may not get into the next release just because of the complexity of testing all these features for a single program, a single product. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, there's one trend that I think is very clear, and I think it's safe to say this is a post pandemic trend, is that, at least in, I'll talk for myself. I put up with sort of lower quality and just sort of I'll just say in general, a lesser experience, and didn't really think twice about it. When I used, in fact, of course, many of us anyway, mostly were using literally conference calls. It literally was a call. Remember those days, Thomas?
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's like if someone says, "Hey, let's do a call." Like, I know immediately, well, it's actually a Zoom, it's a video, but everybody still says call. But now that we live our professional lives anyway, are on video, it seems to me that there has been a real raising of the bar of just what the quality is and the experience. And it really matters, and people notice, and perhaps they're even driving decisions to stop using or to switch platforms or switch technologies, whatever, based on this. Does this ring true? Is this, and again, as an engineer, is this consistent with even what you see in the market?
I don't know. It's quite hard to say, to be honest, because I was always in a video first world, when I was developing conferencing products. And so we had specialist hardware video endpoints on our desks, so we were not just doing things on laptops, we were doing things on expensive hardware units. So it always looked great to me. But
you had pristine quality.
Yeah. So I think one of the things is, if you are in that world, you may not realize how bad things were for everyone else. And I think, therefore, one thing that changed was that video had to get good for hundreds of millions of people very quickly over the pandemic, or at least acceptable. Now, when it first exploded, in fact, people were downgrading the resolution that they were delivering in order to deliver any video at all. So they would, at one point, everything was going down to 360p for everyone in the world. And then very often you would have to turn off video for whole swathes to get audio through. But pretty quickly, the bandwidth got put in. So there was a vast increase of network bandwidth in order to support better quality video. And then there was also huge pressure for people to improve the quality of their video solutions. So that drove AV1 development at Cisco, and I think it's continuing to drive improvements in video coding and video delivery, across all vendors now. People are really competing on video quality, and there has been real cutthroat competition on video quality between the different platforms. People were waiting for the latest Wainhouse report on comparing different platforms, meeting quality and disputing what the findings were and so on. So it really mattered, and competition is the mother of invention, and
yes, it is.
And so the solutions got very much better very quickly. Across the board.
For sure. And we're seeing now some really incredible pre and post processing media chains, or really capabilities that are built in, on the audio front, obviously. So I'm curious. There's super resolution seems to be something, better face detection. I'm even finding, like now people really care about background removal in a way that previously it was kind of a novel feature, kind of like, oh, look, I can, I can be in a forest right now, and of course it usually looked kind of hokey and it was just novel. But now, Not everybody has maybe a nice, they're not able to work with some, simple background or something. There can be a lot of, you might be in a cafe, or a coffee shop, and,
Mm.
you want to go live, but, you don't want to have the person on the other end looking at the table behind you,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of
Yes.
reasons that, yeah,
Yeah, so there's a lot more going on under the hood in these
yes,
solutions than there
yes.
used to be. So there's a lot of pre-processing, um, and increasingly ML based.
Hmm.
So I would also pull out background noise reduction.
Mm,
That's very important, similar to tidying up your visual background. If you are in a cafe, it can have dramatic effects in terms of making things
yeah,
audible to other participants.
yeah.
Um, but in terms of the challenges of getting the product out, you're always sweating over the amount of CPU available. So
Yes.
in our other conversation, we talked about the CPU available for the video encoder. Well, one of the reasons there is not so much available is because you're doing lots of other things. So you're doing this
Hmm.
ML stuff um, to suppress noise or to remove the background nicely. But yeah, with super resolution is a really interesting one because being able to rely, for example, on having super resolution at a receiver means that all your choices for video encoding could be different. You can be
Mm,
trying to encode something that is a good starting point for a super resolution algorithm rather than
mhm,
the best, highest resolution representation of the video that you can produce yourself. So you
mm,
can co optimize those things. And that's going to be a really
mm,
interesting thing going forward. But then there is pre processing as well. Um, Denoising is really important. I have a good
mhm.
camera. Not everyone has a good camera on laptops. In fact, laptop cameras are just extraordinarily bad sometimes. And
I
so
can't
having
figure that one
sophisticated
out.
yeah,
Why is
having
that?
good noise resolution,
Yeah.
noise detection would be really good. No, I don't understand quite why that is. You can pay a lot for a laptop and
Yes.
get a camera that costs 10 cents. So,
Well, so look, we all have, I'm holding up, of course, my iPhone 13 here, but, what an amazing, what just an absolutely incredible camera. And even Apple
yeah.
now, obviously they're not going to put three lenses and there's the industrial design. I totally get that part of it, but why isn't Apple, putting something even better in there? I don't get it in the MacBook Pro, but yeah, there's a reason.
Yeah.
Somebody can explain to us, and maybe we'll find that person and we'll have them on the show. They won't be able to tell us anything though, being from Apple. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that's amazing. Well, so where do you see, now we have the metaverse, the big hot topic, the metaverse, but I am actually, one of my observations about the whole metaverse conversation is it. I think it's easy to get hung up a little bit too much for some of us. And, oh, is the metaverse going to be a thing? Am I really going to live my life with goggles on, headsets, that sort of thing? And in my opinion, like that's kind of not the point. Like who knows? I don't know. Did we think there's so many activities today that I think we could say 15 years ago, 20 years ago, could we honestly say that we believe that we'd be doing the things we're doing now? And I think there's plenty of examples where I'd say, no, I probably wouldn't have, and yet we are. So, but what's interesting about the metaverse to me is that what it does represent is a at scale movement of in real life into a virtual environment. And of course, my personal feeling is that we're kind of already there. For those people who spend 2 hours a day on Facebook or on any of the social
Mm.
platforms, and they're connecting via that social platform, other than the fact that you're not looking at your friends as avatars, and you're not maybe dressed up as different characters or, whatever it is. It's kind of like how is that much different? But what's exciting to me about the metaverse is that it does then extend all of these technologies, and it's going to start, it seems to me. And the question here for you, Thomas, is do you agree that at the most base level, it's going to be web RTC technologies that even enable, call it a dot one of the universe, of the metaverse, because it has to be ultra low latency. It's video, even if it's streaming some sort of an avatar graphical representation, if it's not camera content, but it's synthetic. Do you agree with that? That's kind of or am I way off here?
Well, I think it's certainly true that there will need to be standards for accessing these virtual environments that can be applied by multiple vendors across multiple platforms. I don't know how successful the metaverse can be if it's a single closed platform for a single vendor. I don't think even Meta are large enough to build an entire world that changes how people interact. So I think there will be need to be standards for low latency communication, but whether WebRTC is sufficient for that, I don't know, because there's a whole extra level of requirements around resilience in particular that you need to support. So can we really operate with video frames being dropped when they represent 3D avatars? Can you get a glitch in your immersive experience? So I still think that things are very open on the transport front about how all of this gets supported so that people can actually experience it when they don't have hundreds of megabits of bandwidth to be able to do it. It may require much more client-side rendering, for example, to keep bandwidth really, really low. And that requires more compute at the endpoints and so on. So I don't know how the transport side of it works going forward. The other thing is, I think it's worth thinking about what kind of applications this really fits into, because this is being driven somewhat by very large corporations trying to focus on the business environment and trying to work out business uses for these kind of things. But I wonder whether it is actually the social uses that will really drive adoption, where you need to be kind of semi-physically or with an avatar present with an avatar is in a more social scenario. So I think being able to provide it at low cost for consumer use for social applications will make the big difference to adoption and getting the right technologies in place.
Yeah, and it's a very good point, because even Zoom, just to reference, now has become a primary business tool for a lot of people. Obviously, all the other platforms are used equally, and yet it was not 3, 4, or 5 years ago. I actually knew about Zoom, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago. And it was through some friends that were doing, sort of like these small group, kind of mastermind kind of things, where like 10, 12 people would get together and would talk about a business topic or something. And they found Zoom. It was very inexpensive. In fact, I think they were using the free version. And it's like, hey, there's this thing called Zoom, and so it was not really a business tool. It was kind of more really a personal tool. And so it can go both ways. And of course, then Zoom became a personal, through the pandemic, all of a sudden grandma knew how to use Zoom. So it went both ways. But I think it's very interesting how certainly, and the social networks, Facebook has become very important, even to B2B SaaS companies, and software companies in terms of a marketing vehicle, and yet it's clearly a consumer entertainment platform. Primarily, it's a social platform. So it's a very good point that you're making. Well, it's a super exciting space that we're working in, and I know that in your role at Visionular, you're doing a lot. You're working with some really fabulous companies, and maybe in the future you can come back and share some more insights as to what you're working on. But it's really great, and thank you, Thomas, for coming on and sharing all of your experience. And it's an exciting time to be in video. So yeah.
It certainly is.
It is.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's been great fun. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the Videoverse.